Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my garage. Today we're going to start episode number 5 of the Powerstroke swap series. So thanks for tuning back in, and let's get going on this old truck. So I realized I've never shown the truck that we're going to be putting this in before. So this is it. This is my 94 it's F350 crew cab, long bed. I've had this thing for probably about 2 years now. No, probably closer to a year and a half. I picked it up here with a blown up engine, and I ended up rebuilding it. I converted it from an automatic to a 5-speed, and I've already kind of started here on the dash a little bit. One of the things that I wanted to check is that the bezel that goes around on the diesels, they have little warning indicator panel that goes right here. Has like a wait to start light, warning and fuel filter restriction, and I wanted to see if I could actually adapt that into the gas panel instead of it, needing to pay all the money for the diesel one. So I took that off. I did the modification already. I'll give you a rundown on that later when we get into the interior. But being that I'm going to have to pull the dash out of here, I haven't bothered to put it back together yet. So the other thing I did is I have this solid bench with no adjustment. It doesn't fold. There's no lumbar. Outside of this little cheapy console I threw in there just to give my arm something to rest on. Incredibly uncomfortable. So yesterday I found this guy, and I'm actually really kind of excited about that. I know it's tan. I know it's not going to match, but I actually have a set of seats out of my donor truck that have most of the parts of that seat. Somebody went through and converted them and threw away a bunch of parts, but it's gray interior. So at a later date, we'll kind of go through the steps of reupholstering that tan seat, turning it to gray. We're going to replace the seat foam and get that installed in the truck, so that we'll actually have some comfort to it. So for right now, let's get started on taking this engine out. So if you're not familiar with the 460, this is it. All of its glory. It's just a regular 385 series big block Ford. They've been pretty much using the same thing since the 60s. They've just gone through and done changes, added fuel injection, changed the heads, kept everything emissions compliant. This engine, though, like I say, it's probably only got about 3,000 miles on it now. It's been Ford 30 over. I had the deck milled 30,000s. It's got an aftermarket cam in it. It has the Banks Performance torque tube header system, 3-inch exhaust. It cuts out in front of the axle. So pretty much about the most I can do to it and still keep it smog compliant, and it's just not cutting it. So first thing we're going to start on here is we're going to get all the fluids drained out of it. We're going to get the oil drained, get the coolant drained. We're going to drain the power steering. I've already gone and evacuated the AC system out of it, so we can go ahead and disconnect the AC lines, get the condenser out. We've got to get the transmission and transfer case drained as well. So I'm going to get going on all that, and obviously first thing we want to do is disconnect the battery, and being that it's coming out anyway, I think I'm just going to pull it all together so that we don't have to worry about it. Alright guys, so since we got pretty much everything under the truck done for right now, I'm gonna just work on pulling everything off from the fender wells. We'll get the whole front end removed, the bumper, grill, headlights, the support here, and then everything down this way here. And the reason I want to do that is I think I'm actually going to just pull the fender wells out completely and then have this whole front end open, because it's actually going to make me getting the bolts on the headers a whole bunch easier. So I think once I get that done, then I can go through and kind of disconnect all the rest of the stuff from the engine, and then we can get this thing pulled out. Alright guys, so I figured I'd take a break from what I was doing there and show you kind of where I'm at. Got a lot of the stuff disconnected and pretty much just ready to remove the radiator core support. So let me show you kind of here what we got going on. So coming down the driver's side here, we got all the wiring harness. It's pretty much all unbolted. I even did the one that goes back down the frame rail because I'm gonna have to replace that one too. The connectors for the fuel sending units are totally different on the diesel than they are on the gas. This one actually has more wires because of the fuel pumps. But I got the ECM and the body harness unplugged. I took out the TFI, the ignition module, because the IDM is actually gonna end up bolting up here. So now that we got the fender well here all out of the way, you can kind of see how much room I have to do what I need to do to get the exhaust out. It's just going to make everything a whole bunch easier for me. You know, I can just basically tuck my engine harness out of the way, and then I can also drain the power steering fluid a lot easier. I can get to the hoses here super easy. A couple of other things I did this off camera. I went and I evacuated my AC system. That way I could just go ahead and disconnect all this here without needing to illegally vent all that to the atmosphere. So I got the wire harness kind of just draped aside. I'm going to leave it attached here to the core support just because I have to pull the radiator and everything to fish that harness out. And since I'm doing a diesel swap, none of this is going to be used anymore. You can kind of get an idea, and I'll try and lay these side to side if I can, but you can see the opening here is a whole bunch smaller than the opening is on the diesel. It's just a whole bunch more open across here and on this side too. And we're actually going to go and have to cut openings on both ends over here to allow the intercooler to get the hoses, the intercooler piping through it. So on the passenger side, I went and I pulled all the mufflers out for the smog system. I pulled the vacuum canister out. I got all of our wire harness here undone. So really the only thing that is staying in the truck for now is the battery cables, and the negative and then the positive right here going to the starter, and then the sub harness here for the alternator. Pretty much it's going to leave this harness with the engine when we go to pull it. This cable is just sitting in there, so we can actually just go ahead and set that aside. And then the ground cable is bolted to the frame and to the engine, so I'm gonna have to do that. I'll just deal with that when I'm doing the exhaust system. But we got our radiator bypass hose undone. I already took the upper and lower radiator hose out, and then we got this AC line here undone also. So really the only thing I have left is I have 2 bolts back here on both sides, excuse me, one here and one here, and then the 4 bolts here that hold this inner panel on. And then down here we have the core support mount on both sides. So we undo those body mounts, and then this whole thing comes out in one great big giant piece. So pretty much everything to this point has just been real simple and easy, nuts and bolts on, you know, taking simple stuff out. So I didn't really feel a need to have to show everything. Going back together with all the diesel stuff, I'm going to have to kind of manipulate and move things around. So, you know, really it's just going to be a totally different thing going back together. So yeah, I'll get that core support out and then kind of show you what our next step is. Alright, so now that we got the core support out of here, you can see we have a ton of room now to work on this thing and get this engine out, get the new one in without having anything in the way. So I'm going to just do a couple basic things. We're going to pull the lower radiator hose the rest of the way out. Then I can go through, and I'm actually going to take the return line off of the power steering and get that draining. And then I got to do a couple little things here. So I got to disconnect my heater hoses. I have the two fuel lines that come into the back of the engine. I got to get disconnected, and then I just got to go through and kind of disconnect everything else that I haven't done already. I got to take the rest of the AC lines off. I got to do the throttle cable, and really the way that I do the AC lines is I just take them off right on the back of the accumulator, and this one here taken off at the condenser. Just kind of ball them up, and then that way I only have to cap this and the condenser. This one here I just take off right here just to get this piece out of my way so I don't worry about damaging it. And then yeah, pretty much just going to work on getting the exhaust out, and then really all we'll have to do is the motor mounts, the transmission mount, and this thing should be ready to lift out. So getting pretty close. All right guys, we're back. I kind of turned the camera off there for a little while just because there was a lot of different stuff going on just involved in getting these headers off. They aren't even out, they're just sitting there, they're unbolted. Problem is, to get them out, they're a fight. I actually kind of forgot how much of a struggle it was even getting those in. You got to have all the spark plugs out, you have the spark plug wires off. It does actually help if you jack the engine up a little bit, and then you can kind of finagle them in. I particularly remember this passenger side being an absolute nightmare to get. So nonetheless, it's unbolted. It's just sitting there. As soon as I pick the engine up, it's probably going to fall right out the back. That's fine. I'm okay with that. And then the same thing here on the driver's side. It's just unbolted and kind of sitting there. So a couple things I did have to do off camera. I had to pull the whole throttle body and the little horn setup off of here, just so I could get room to get the engine hoist in. And then I had these brackets off. There's one on each head, and the lift point is very similar to like the 7.3 is. I kind of disliked the way that they looked, so I had taken them off, and trying to get the one in the back of the head was a bit of a fight. It was very tight back there. It was kind of blind. It just took a lot longer than I was expecting. And then obviously I had to try and Mickey Mouse the hardware together because I had no idea where I put the bolts. So that took a whole bunch of time also. But I did get the transmission cross member out. So it's literally just sitting in there by the floor jack. And the way that we're going to take this out is all in one piece. We're just going to pull the engine and transmission all together. It does work with a 460 to do it that way, especially with a manual trans. That transmission is pretty slender, so it kind of slips right out over the top of the transmission, excuse me, the engine cross member very easily. You can't do that on the Powerstroke. The oil pan is just so deep that there's no room to get it out. You can see how far you have to get this up to come over the cross member, and then the transmission is really big and bulky, and it's just a really tall engine, so you end up getting where the turbo will get stuffed into the firewall. Just this distance here is greater than what the opening is on there. So 460 luckily has a little bit smaller oil pan, and we got a smaller transmission we're dealing with. So we're just gonna pull this whole assembly out and kind of set it aside. All right, guys, so you can see we finally got that thing out. I'm not sure if you saw or not in the time lapse, I did actually kind of get hung up a little bit, and it took me a little bit of work to get it undone. So let me show you what I had going on. So right here, there's the stub shifter that comes out of the transmission. It's about that tall. It kept getting hung up on the right on this lip of the firewall where the firewall meets the body. You can actually see where I was kind of getting hung up here. So what I had to do is just hang it and pull it out. You can actually see it sitting on the ground right there. And then as soon as I did that, it came out a whole bunch easier. So there's a couple things I got to do before I can put this other engine in. I actually need to clearance the firewall right here just a little bit for the new downpipe. And then I need to clean this up. And I got to put some insulation on there just to keep the heat, because now the turbo is going to be sitting right back in here. And it's going to put a lot of heat in the cab, so we're going to have to insulate that. And then I'm going to have to get these two motor mounts out here, because these aren't going to work. The diesel ones actually attach in these 4 bolts, so I got to put those motor mount plates on, get those out, and it should be ready to go. So I'm going to just pause the video, and I'll catch you back when I get that all done. All right, guys, so here's a little update of what I'm talking about. So this right here is the 460 mount. You can see how it sits way back here. So the engine mounts actually drop into this hole. The 7.3s go in here, and they use this bracket. So here you can see the difference between the 7.3 and the 7.5 460 engine mount. So that diesel engine is just bigger. The mounts are in a different location. And then since we're going with that bigger downpipe, I went and I clearanced this out. You see it used to be this diameter here all the way around. So we radiused this back, and then I pushed the floor back right here just a little bit. That way that downpipe has a nice path to flow through. So I wiped this down with some degreaser, and now I'm just going to go ahead and lay that heat insulation pad on there. And then we'll get this last mount changed out, and it should be ready to get this engine back in. All right, guys, so making some good progress here. We got the heat insulation. I mainly just wanted to do the firewall here, but the piece that I bought actually was enough to do the firewall, and I had enough left over to do the heater box, or the evaporator side of it. So I took that ugly piece that was on there off. The thing was full of mostly dirt anyway. And then I did a couple layers on here to kind of really help keep the AC cold. But this stuff is actually pretty nice. It molds out really nice. It peels and sticks on really nice and secure. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. I think it's going to work out pretty good. Went to try and get this other mount out here, and what I found, I don't even really know if the camera's going to pick it up here, but down in here they ended up using 4 body rivets instead of bolts. So I'm going to have to actually just cut those off and pound them out before I can bolt this this next mount in. So I'm just going to stop the video, and that's going to take me a little while to do. I hate doing these rivets. They're loud, they're messy, just not my favorite thing. So I'll be back in a little while. All right, guys, we're back. So I got the 7.3 motor mount installed. That other one, just a pain in the neck where they had all that stuff riveted in. I couldn't get a grinder up underneath there from either side, and I couldn't get any kind of chisel or cutting bit in there. So what I ended up needing to do was take my Sawzall and basically cut a section of the mount out so I could get to these rivets from the back side, which kind of sucked because I had to get them from not the end that you would normally cut off. I had to get them from the bigger end, and you can see I just had to grind them down, punch them out with a hammer and a chisel and an air hammer, and I guess the only saving grace by doing it from the backside, I didn't contact the frame at all. The hardest part was trying to work around this brake line that's back here, but nonetheless, it's in, it's done. We're ready for the next step of this this install. I think the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it a little backward than normal. Usually put the engine in and then put the transmission up to it, but I don't have a transmission jack. I don't really have a very good way of doing it. So I'm going to put the transmission in first, get it up on its mount, and then just kind of support the front with the jack. And then I think what I can do is actually go and get the engine. I think I can actually line it up a little bit easier that way. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a fight no matter how I go about doing it, but I think that way is going to be a little bit less of a fight. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and put the transmission cross member in, and then we'll work on getting the transmission up underneath of the truck. All right, guys, I'm going to show you a little trick here on how to get one of these transmissions in if you're trying to do this by yourself. Now, don't mind the slave cylinder. It's just kind of hanging here in the way. I haven't had a chance to actually go and pull all that stuff out yet. I probably should have, just to make it easier. But this is a trick that a friend of mine taught me to kind of help get these transmissions positioned in a place, just because they're so darn heavy. They're awkward. There's no way you can do it by yourself, and a floor jack isn't going to help you at all because there's no flat spot on the bottom of that pan. So if you take some pretty heavy duty ratchet straps and go across the frame, you can actually jack this thing up, and then it turns into a sling. So now the transmission's supported. You can see it's completely off the ground. There's nothing there holding it except those ratchet straps. So what I'm going to do is just ratchet this up just enough to where I can get my floor jack underneath of it, and then I'm going to basically get the back of it set up on the cross member, and then have my jack in the front of it and just support it while I go and bring the engine in, and then I can use the jack to line the front up. The back will be supported because it'll be on the transmission mount. So just a little something I thought I'd show you here. All right, guys, so we got this engine pretty much ready to go back in. I just wanted to go over a couple things that I did since episode 4, because there's a couple things different on this engine. For starters, we got the flywheel on. I got everything torqued down. It's actually 89 foot-pounds is what they call. And we got our adapter plate reinstalled on here too. One of the things, if you'll notice, this is a brand new flywheel. When I took the old one out and started cleaning it, I got to looking, and if you look real close, you can actually see all the way around here, this flywheel was cracked. I actually don't know how that thing didn't completely bust out. It wasn't making any noise. I was actually kind of surprised to see it was broken, but I'm kind of happy I caught it, because that would have led to all kinds of issues very shortly down the road. So we got a brand new flywheel on there. I went ahead and I took the turbo off. Like I said, I can't put this in because of its height. It hits the firewall, and I'm going to need a little bit more clearance to get that in. My intercooler boot showed up, so I just put this elbow on. It shouldn't be in the way. It should be all right. And I got the wire harness, all the accessories back in. I got all the drive accessories on. I got the crank pulley in. So pretty much kind of wanted to have it like it would if it were rolling down the assembly line at Ford. That way it just kind of makes that installing it a little bit easier. Easier, I hope. So I think with the way we got this set, I'm just going to kind of tuck that up and grab it with the engine hoist, and we'll get it put in. All right, guys. Well, that's about it for tonight. I got the engine in. It's on the mounts. Transmission's all bolted up. Transmission mount is bolted in. So it's in there, man. It's home. So I'm gonna just pick up my disaster of a mess that I made today, take a shower because I'm filthy, and call this the end of episode 5. So I don't know, I might just video putting everything else back together, making like a little documentary of, you know, getting all the wiring in and everything else hooked up, and you know, see how it comes out. A lot of that stuff is kind of boring, actually, just to, you know, watching hooking stuff up. So but, you know, like I say, I'll record it, we'll see how it comes out, and then if I decide to post it, I will. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, comment. I always try and reply back to my comments, and I'll catch you on the next one.